Uh-oh.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So hi everyone, and welcome to the Area 11 panel discussion on housing and commercial development tonight. My name is Karen Hunt. I'm with the Regional Planning Agency, or the RPA for short. The RPA is a joint city-county agency and is responsible for developing 12 different area plans that will eventually cover all of Hamilton County. So we will be your hosts for this and any subsequent Area 11 meetings. By the way, you will hear us use the words Area 11 and East Brainerd area interchangeably throughout the night and throughout this whole process, so don't be confused. They're the same thing. Before we start the presentation, I need to go over a few housekeeping items with everyone. First of all, we usually have meetings like this in person, but while we still have some COVID precautions in place, we're going to continue to use some online meetings. In fact, many of you told us during the Area 11 kickoff meeting that you actually preferred online meetings. So we're going to do some of both. We will be planning some in-person events a little bit later this summer. Secondly, emails and the website is really our primary means of communicating with you. So please check our website regularly and watch for emails from the RPA. We will be sending periodic email updates to everyone who registers for these webinars and to everyone who has signed up for our email list. So if you know someone who hasn't signed up, hasn't been participating, please help us spread the word and let them know about it. Next, we are recording this meeting. So if you want to watch it again later, or you know someone who's not able to be here tonight that might want to watch it, you'll be able to see that on our website probably within the next day or two. It may not be up right away, so check back in another day or two. And that website address is on the screen, so you can see that. We'll also be posting that link and some others in the chat box tonight, so if you want to check that. For those of you who might be new to using Zoom meetings, I think we're all getting pretty used to them, but maybe not some people. I want to cover just a couple of technical items. First of all, you'll see a toolbar down in the bottom of your screen. Now, if you happen to be watching from a phone or some other mobile device, it may be elsewhere, but typically if you're on a computer, it's at the bottom of your screen. In that toolbar, you will see a button that says Chat. If you click on that button, a chat box will open on your screen. And during the meeting, one of our staff will be posting some links to various resources in the chat box, and you may find some of those helpful. So check that every once in a while. In the same toolbar, you'll also see a button that says Q&A. Now, this is where you can type in questions tonight that you want to send to our staff or panelists. We will either type an answer back to you or address your question verbally during the Q&A time after the presentation. If you have used Zoom before, you may be used to typing questions in the chat box, but you won't be able to do that tonight. So you'll need to use that Q&A box instead. In fact, you can send us questions at any time during this presentation. You don't have to wait until the end. You can go ahead and type them in and we'll get to you. If you do have a question, during the Q&A, if you do have a question, please raise your hand. That is another button down at the bottom of the your screen in the toolbar. So if you want to ask us a question verbally, just raise your hand. When it's your turn, we will call on you. We will unmute you, and then you should be able to speak to everyone. Just note you may need to unmute your own microphone at your end as well. Okay, we have allotted 90 minutes for this meeting. If we're not able to get to all of your questions tonight, we will be creating a list of frequently asked questions that we will be posting on our website. So please check there in a day or two. In fact, throughout the next few months, we'll be updating that list periodically. So do check our website now and then. And finally, we hate to mention this, but we all have to. Anyone sharing inappropriate comments during this meeting or in the Q&A box will be removed from the meeting. So we just ask everyone to be nice tonight. So before I turn this over to Eric for his presentation, I want to quickly introduce you to our staff, and then we'll let our panelists I guess Eric's going to kind of introduce them in his presentation. First of all, I want to introduce you to John Bridger, our executive director. I can't see you, John, but if you could wave. I guess he's up on the screen. And then once again, I'm Karen Hunt. I'm the director of our Community Planning and Design Division, and we're the division of the RPA that works on these area plans. Next, Pam Glazer. Pam, if you want to wave.
Hey there, glad you're here tonight.
Pam is a principal planner on our staff. Pam was the project lead for the past 2 area plans, the White Oak Mountain Plan and the Historic River to Ridge Plan. Next, Travis Kazmerzak is a senior planner on our staff. Travis is going to be posting links in the chat box tonight and answering some of your questions in the Q&A box. And finally, Eric Matravers is also a senior planner on our staff, and he is the project lead for the East Brainerd area plan. If you joined us back during the kickoff meetings for Area 11, you may remember that Sarah Cook was the project lead, but Sarah took another job, so Eric has stepped up to the plate, and he's been involved in this area plan since the very beginning, so he just picked right up where Sarah left off. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric to share a quick little presentation with you, and after that, our panelists will each tell you a little bit about themselves and some of the projects they're working on. And then we will open it up to you for questions. So thank you again for participating with us tonight. Please stay involved throughout the process. This is your community, so we need to hear from all of you. Eric, I'll let you take it from there.
All right, thanks, Kay. So welcome everyone to the first of 3 panels in our Community Choices panel discussion series. As Karen said, the other 2 panels will be later this month. If you haven't already, I encourage you to sign up and attend them. Today's event is going to take a deeper look at commercial and residential development issues in East Brainerd. Real quick, Councilman Ledford has asked that I share that he intended to be here tonight, but a personal matter came up. County Commissioner Smedley has also passed on her regards and said she plans to listen in at the next meeting. So just so you know, your local officials or elected officials are paying attention and are involved. Okay, so real quick, first I'm going to speak for a few minutes on the context of this meeting. If this is your first one and you're not sure what's even going on here or who we are, I'll give you a quick frame up of what RPA does, look into what a plan is and what it does. Then we'll look at the issues, some of the issues that the community identified related to housing and commercial development, and some that RPA has identified as well. Next, I'll introduce our expert panel. These are professionals who have experience working in the field of land development, and I'll give them each a couple minutes to share their backgrounds and what they're going to bring to the discussion. And after that, I'm going to have a few questions myself for the panelists to kind of get the conversation going. And then we'll open it up for a question and answer phase for anyone who can ask the panel or RPA staff questions related to growth and development in Area 11. And then I'll do a quick wrap up just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page going forward. Okay, so context, like I said, what is RPA? What does an area plan do? What does it not do? Where is this? and what has RPA learned from the community so far? RPA is the agency that works for and makes recommendations to Chattanooga Planning Commission and Hamilton County Planning Commission. Those are the appointed boards that make decisions on rezonings and other land use cases that are brought before them. RPA makes recommendations to them about the rezoning cases on whether we think they should approve, deny, or other based on our expertise. But we also do research and analysis. We staff the federally mandated transportation planning organization that handles federal transportation funding. And then, as Karen said, our team, Community Planning and Design, develops land use plans for different parts of the city and county. So we just completed an area plan for East Chattanooga. That was Area 3. And before that, we completed a plan for the Appleton and Ottawa region. That's area 12. So what do plans do and what do they not do? First of all, they analyze existing conditions. We take a look at demographics, census data. We look at the transportation network, jobs and housing, parks and greenways, the whole built environment, and a lot of the natural environment too. The plans provide a community vision for future land development. So we're looking at what are the future uses and what is the future development pattern of housing, of commercial uses, of institutions, and then also how do we want our transportation infrastructure priorities to shake out. They guide rezoning decisions. So again, when a developer or a builder wants to rezone a property, this plan, the Area 11 plan, will be used by RPA staff and Planning Commission to help decide whether to approve that request. And then lastly, they guide public infrastructure. So we make recommendations in this plan for roads, bridges, sidewalks, sewer, and other investments. And that dovetails pretty well into what area plans don't do. I'm gonna skip to that bottom bullet there on the right. They don't ensure, they don't ensure funding of recommended projects. So they don't ensure funding for roads or sidewalks or sewer. The plan makes recommendations only. So we don't build anything. That's up to entities like TDOT, to WWTA, to Hamilton County Schools to look at our recommendations and to follow them. And skipping back up to the top bullet there, they don't regulate zoning either. So in order for properties to be rezoned by a local government, a follow-up zoning study would have to be conducted specifically for rezoning. And that's at the request of your council person. So we're very many steps removed from coming in and rezoning someone's property. And then that middle bullet there, plans also don't directly address social issues. So we might acknowledge and look into issues like healthcare or education or affordable housing, but that's a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. We're mostly focused on land use. Okay, so where is this exactly? That inset map in the top left is the 12 planning areas that RPA is kind of divvied up based on geography and council districts and some other elements. And that highlighted purple is the main map that you're looking at there. So this is area 11. It's mostly East Brainerd. It's an 11 square mile area that's east of I-75. It's east of South Chick Creek there, north of Georgia. And then the eastern boundary is mostly unincorporated Hamilton County. So this is entirely within the city boundary. Obviously, Hamilton Place is a big component of this area and the retail development on Gun Barrel, but also there's a lot of longstanding neighborhoods here that have a lot of history. They've been here for many decades or more. And then, of course, this area experienced a tragedy last spring, or rather spring of 2020 with the April tornadoes. We know a lot of work's been done to clean up and rebuild, certainly. But a lot of families are still kind of struggling in the aftermath. So I want to acknowledge that too when we're looking at this area. Okay, some quick facts that we've found in our research about this area specifically. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've seen with housing and what we've seen with commercial development and how that kind of relates to national trends. So just real quick, I'm going to rattle off a couple statistics here. 70% of new housing built from 2010 to 2017 was single family homes. That's here in Area 11. 66% of that is single family homes with 3 or more bedrooms. So they're moderately sized houses. And then 30% of all those residents are single household holders living alone. So there's a little bit of potential disconnect there because we know while this housing development pattern is kind of similar to other suburban parts of our town and other suburban places in the country, the housing stock doesn't necessarily match with what people locally and nationally are looking for. We know that millennials want mobile, walkable lifestyles. They're willing to swap more household space for shorter commutes and mixed use neighborhoods and things like that. And then on the other end of the generational spectrum, we have baby boomers who are working and living longer, but in their later years, they're not able to drive or choose not to drive, and they don't necessarily want to be dependent on their family members. So a lot of boomers are downsizing and moving somewhere where they can get around more easily on their own. So that's what we're seeing from the housing standpoint. And then Also, there's the changing retail landscape. So from 2016 to 2019, 291 commercial building permits were issued in Area 11, but only 10% of those were for new construction. So this suggests to us that this area can't really support more retail than what's already there. 90% of it is basically being retrofitting of existing structures. When we talk about a retail space or a retail area being supported from a market analysis standpoint, you're talking about how many household rooftops can actually service that place of business and keep it open, right? So we're kind of at a capacity limit here. And of course, we've had some brick and mortar closures in the last couple of years. Some of that was exacerbated by COVID. But a lot of these buildings also have been repurposed by new retail uses. In fact, most of them have been. There's an overall slow decline of retail that we've seen locally and nationally, especially. Partly that's due to the national shift towards e-commerce and the rise of Amazon. But we also have locally and nationally a oversupply of retail. There's a report by a firm called Cohen Research that recently found that the shopping space per capita in the United States is 40% higher than it is in Canada and 5 times higher than it is in the UK. So we like to shop, we have a lot of shopping space, but we maybe have too much at this point. So considering that, how might these properties be used differently in the future if retail is at its limit for this area and for nationally? And then real quick, just looking at the Kickoff survey response. So this question was, what is the most critical issue facing Area 11 today? This is from our spring Kickoff event, and we had a corresponding survey. So when asked, what is that most critical issue? You can see that blue slice of pie there. 35.5% of the responses were related to development. And of those, that top one was people felt that there was too much growth and a lack of infrastructure to support it. And to a lesser extent, some feel that commercial expansion down the corridors and into neighborhoods is a top issue. So another question, I don't have a slide for it, but I'll say also that when asked what would you like to see more of in Area 11, 57.5% of survey respondents said they would like to see more walkable retail. A good example of that might be Cambridge Square in Ottawa. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. So that also fits well with the national trends in changing preferences. More and more people are wanting to be able to walk or bike to shopping and comfortably walk between those destinations. So with that, we've got a lot of desires, a lot of challenges in this area, and that's what our panelists today are going to help us explore. So real quick, I'm gonna introduce our panelists, and if you would just wave and speak up so we can make sure your image pops up for our audience here. And yeah, just give us a moment to introduce yourself and explain your perspective on housing and commercial development as it relates locally and as it relates nationally. So we have Eric Myers, the director of Chattanooga Design Studio. Eric, can you say hi?
Hello, good evening. Thanks for having me.
We also have Michael Kenner, the Chief Executive Officer of Beacon Development.
Hey guys, girls, nice to see you.
Oh, there we go, okay. And Mike Price, President of MAP Engineers.
Good evening, glad to have everyone here. Hope to be able to answer anyone's questions and go through some of the issues that face East Brainerd. Lived here in Chattanooga my whole life.
And finally, we have Rostis Timochuk. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yep.
That is the owner of NR Properties.
Good evening. I'm here as a resident of Area 11 as well as a builder and developer. So would like to listen in and maybe comment a little bit about as a developer and a resident both.
All right, so I'm going to pass the torch to Eric Myers first, and we'll just roll down the line. Eric, you got it.
Thanks, Eric. I think my role here this evening is kind of set the tone in a big picture way, particularly national trends and local trends that are affecting sort of the East Brainerd area. First and foremost, for the past several years, the Chattanooga area in general is ranked in the top 5 real estate markets in the country. And that's considerable when you think about some of the competition that we're talking about here is, you know, Winston-Salem and Memphis and Columbia, South Carolina. Even Forbes predicted that the Chattanooga area will have an employment boom in 2020, and that really hasn't been very much affected by COVID. Next. So the real estate demand, you know, shows up, and it's apparent in local news as well. When you kind of see the main headlines and main topics covering things such as lack of housing supply and growing housing demand and the never-ending zoning debate seemingly about where development can and should take place. Next. It's important to know that in the planning sort of profession, academically, these issues have been simmering for decades, really across the country, and communities like Chattanooga across the country. Ellen Denham Jones, just down the road at Georgia Tech, published a book recently titled Retrofitting Suburbia. And that book really includes 32 case studies of existing suburban areas that absorbed new growth and evolved in relationship to changing demographics, like the ones we're going to probably discuss this evening, those technological issues and economic conditions that faced communities much like East Brainerd. Next. It's important to note really that the Greater Chattanooga Realtors 2020 report shows a steep drop in available homes for sale in the East Brainerd area. I've highlighted here that that's about a 50% drop in the available homes on the market. And that's also compounding this demand for new housing in the East Brainerd area. But when you look across the board, you can kind of see this is a community-wide problem. The average amount of homes on the market in 2020 dropped precipitously. Next. And so that was a real kind of simple overview summary of the residential demand and the problems that are being exacerbated by residential demand. Commercially, at the same time, we see the market trend that's affecting East Brainerd area in struggling and closing of area malls. This is Landmark Mall in particular in Alexandria, Virginia. And I just want to share an example of Landmark Mall to kind of open your mind to what's happening across the nation. Next. You know, as a struggling commercial site, COVID really hammered Landmark Mall, and it had been in decline for decades. This past year, Landmark Mall and the ownership and a new development team passed zoning entitlements that will allow the Landmark Mall site to transform into a very robust mixed-use community. Next. And that plan, as you see here in the 3D rendering, identifies locations for new multifamily housing, for medical offices and medical services on the site, as well as new condensed retail opportunities and corner retail shops. A very walkable, compact site. That's a dramatic change over the Landmark Mall site. Next. So here's another example in Meridian, Connecticut, about the same size and scale of a suburb of New Haven, Connecticut, and a mall of 15-acre site that was formerly known as the Hub. And the area in this 15-acre site was economically depressed over since the 1990s and challenged with compounding stormwater control issues over time. Next. Over a decade, the developer and the landowners and coordinated development efforts worked with the city of Meridian, and they developed a project called Meridian Green, which is now a public park. And that public park is being leveraged by Meridian Green and Meridian, Connecticut to create new development opportunities surrounding that park. So for things such as mixed use opportunities, affordable housing, and just housing in general, where someone might want to look over a place like the slide that you see and wake up every morning looking at something like this. Next. And so I would like to just summarize with this slide and say that East Brainerd, the area, I'm not an expert on East Brainerd, but I would like you to know that you're not alone. Communities across the country are facing these similar challenges where demand for housing is increasing, demand for development is increasing, construction and land costs are only rising more sharply every year, And real estate pressures are just creating new opportunities for us to all have to work together more intelligently and more intently. You know, I have found in the planning that I've been doing for the last few years that AARP Livable Communities is an incredibly valuable free resource to so many people that want to know how these very issues impact the quality of life for their future and the planning of their neighborhoods and their communities in the future. And so to me, this is why a planning process like this is so important. This is why I volunteered to be a part of your panel. I am not an expert on East Brainerd, but I think that it's incredibly important that a process like this help collectively identify where new growth can and should occur and how the balance of preservation of suburban residential density and reducing traffic demand and allowing for continued investment in the area. I think that's incredibly important. And that's why I'm here tonight. And I thank you all for letting me say something.
All right, thanks, Ed. Michael, I'm gonna hand it off to you next.
I'm Michael Kenner. I am the CEO of Meridian Development. We are a mission-oriented development company. We are based in Nashville, Tennessee. We have projects in Nashville, in Chattanooga, and in Pittsburgh, PA. I acquired the Rock 10 industrial site that backs up to the sculpture fields. That's right off Main Street in Holtzclaw. And I specialize in affordable housing policy, both at state and local levels. I have helped Nashville write several different affordable housing policies to create affordable housing without using what's called LIHTC or low-income housing tax credits. And I've worked with several other municipalities on how to create affordable housing. I'm a member of Urban Land Institute. I'm a recipient of the Design Excellence Award from Urban Land Institute, and part of a big initiative that Urban Land Institute has is Retrofitting Suburbia, the book that Eric brought up in his slideshow, which is an excellent book. And then on top of the Building Healthy Places initiative, which really promotes what we call concrete busting, where you kind of get rid of these seas of parking and figure out creative ways to do so. I am the founder of Turbo Nashville, which is Tactical Urbanism Organizers of Nashville, which is actually housed under the Nashville Civic Design Center. And so we do this stuff called Tactical Urbanism, which is using temporary measures to influence permanent change. From what I understand, you guys have an initiative down there that's with your local design studio as well. And we have used that as kind of a precursor to any kind of solid infrastructure the city would put about. And it's also a really cool way to kind of get buy-in at grassroots level for projects in the community and things that can bring about change. And so I would say most of all, I am a disruptor. I like to see how far I can push the envelope and see if we can push it further from there. So that's my my intro, and that's it.
All right. Thanks, Michael. I understand Mike and Ross want to kind of tag team their section, so I'll hand it off to you guys next. And I think y'all are muted. Still muted. There we go. Okay. You're good to go.
Sorry, I couldn't get the mouse to cooperate there.
All right, you're good.
Good. Mike Price, MAP engineer. We have been in business here. I've owned this company for 25 years and worked for several other companies in the Chattanooga area, and grew up here in the area. So this is home and has been home for most of my life. So Eric, are we going to go through as far as the slides at this point that we got? Is
Sure, I can click through them if you like.
Yeah. So having lived in East Brainerd for about 14 years, my wife grew up here in this same area 11. So very, very familiar with the area, and our office is located in area 11. And in the course of time, we have seen some of the development trends that have been alluded to by the other panelists and RPA, seeing changes as it relates to some of the development patterns in the area. So what I thought I would do is to kind of go through and show some of the projects recently that we have gotten approved and are either under construction or have already been built. And so with that, if you'll show the first slide. So this is located at Gun Barrel Road and Landers Road, which is there at the intersection with the traffic signal there on Gun Barrel, where the old Payless Shoes used to be located, and where the private road, for those who still may not know exactly where this is, that's the private road that goes by the bank, and then Lowe's is back behind their parking lot there to the right of the picture. So as was alluded to earlier, as it related to a number of the commercial permits that have been obtained in the area, most of those have been for readaptive use. And so what we have seen, for instance, in this instance, is that the Payless Shoes, which went out of business several years ago, is now being repurposed into a Wendy's restaurant. And so the plan is to go through and reconstruct and reconfigure that site, providing a drive-through, but also providing some walkability as it relates to some of the concerns that were voiced that have not been previously provided, maybe so much in the area, by providing a pedestrian walkway coming off the sidewalk from Gun Barrel that brings you into an outdoor seating area that faces Gun Barrel Road, and then provides, which is sort of the newer trend as it relates to for restaurant, fast food restaurants, is a double drive-through lane to sort of speed the access which people can get through. So this is a perfect example of what we're seeing as readaptive uses to commercial businesses for some of those into the area. And if you've noticed, of course, recently the AAA facility there at the entrance to Hamilton Place Mall is torn down, and a Trader Joe's has gone in its place. So that, again, just within a stone's throw of each other, there's two examples very close together as it relates to seeing this sort of readaptive use. Next slide. So this is a development that is under construction there at the intersection of Mintom and Gun Barrel Road. So this would be on the east side of Gun Barrel. Publix is just a little bit south of here, and west side of Gun Barrel Road. And so this is a particular type of condominium type of development where the homes into here are typically duplexes. There's one triplex that is in here, but it is very narrower, condensed streets, a little bit of on-site parking, tightly packed in, single entrance coming in off of Mintom Road. And typically when one would have seen a development maybe like this in the past, this would not have been received necessarily favorably in areas such as East Brainerd. But I can tell you that these homes are going to go to the $400,000 to $500,000 mix in terms of the price point. And so this type of development is something that we are seeing occurring a little bit more often based upon the land values in East Brainerd, but also construction costs. So this is more of where people are wanting to have that walkability, and you'll see sort of where those piano keys is what we refer to them, that crosses the drive, which provides access getting to the community lots, but also providing walkability to go down Gun Barrel Road and cross over through the walkways and sidewalks provided to, say, the Publix or the shopping center over in Waterside. Next. So this is a development that is located off of Shalford Road, and this would be east of Jenkins Road. And the development plan in here was to put a number of townhouses in through here, but have a lot of community space that would back up in through here. Community clubhouse, pool. It actually ended up having a single entrance with a gated entrance. That was one of the requirements that came about as it went through the rezoning process. But again, a different type of mix that we have not typically seen in times past in East Brainerd, but it again shows that the trends are changing as it relates to the expectation. This is a for rent community, And those have been very successful as of late, where people are not wanting to be taking care of the yard and the lawn and other housekeeping exterior improvements that have to be made to a home. They want somebody else to take care of that. And so this is, again, another type of housing mix that we're seeing occur in the East Brainerd area. Next. This is another type of same rental product. And so this particular site went through 4 zoning cases, the first 3 of which were denied, all of which were asking for your standard, if you will, apartment type development, which would have ended up with a density of around 16 to 18 units per acre, 3 to 4 story buildings. What I can tell you is immediately west and south of this development is apartments, the standard 3 to 4 story apartments. And then in front of this is the Morning Point assisted living facility is directly in front. And now there's a church that's being constructed on that larger parcel that lines up across from Ashford Village. So after 3 unsuccessful tries to rezone for a standard subdivision, when this was presented to the community, given the fact that a church was going to be constructed out front, and then this was going to be a single story for rent product, but with a much less density, so I mean, sitting somewhere around 8 units per acre, the community accepted this, and this is now completed. And from what I understand and talking to some of the residents out here, no one's had any complaints, and people are very satisfied with regards to what took place here versus what might have otherwise. Next. And this is a subdivision. This is more of a standard subdivision in some ways. This is located off of Mackey Lane, East Brainerd. So Davidson Road is nearby this particular development. But you'll notice in the middle, you see these hatched areas. And so what was occurring here is one where we were able to develop a plan, but also take into account the environmental issues. And so those hatched areas are wetlands, and they are surrounded, if you will, by water. And so it afforded the ability to create sort of a unique type of development that is really not standard necessarily in East Brainerd area as it relates to standard single family subdivisions, where you've got these large spaces which are set aside for wetlands, and you're going to have those areas which they'll be having some docks located off of for people to fish and sit and watch the wildlife and that sort of thing. The other thing that was interesting here is you see how the streets end in a T configuration. Those are called hammerheads. And previously in years past, we would have a standard round cul-de-sac. But in recent time, Chattanooga has adapted to be a little bit more progressive in allowing head-in set of roundabouts to now go into these head-in T intersections called hammerheads, which take up less land and give people the ability to still turn around, though it takes a 3-point turn to do it, but it takes up and requires less asphalt as a result. So I think that's a good change as it relates to being allowed to do those sorts of changes in development guidelines. Next. And I think at that point, Ross, turn it over to you.
Good evening, Ross Distemashuk with NR Properties. Glad to be here to discuss a little bit about what was brought up on the commercial side, seeing the demand for retail and other uses go down. We are working on several projects and have done several projects in Area 11, one of which is the old AMC Theater off of Gun Barrel Road. We're going to be looking to do a study to see what the highest and best use is for that. But that's a theater, old theater that has shut down. We were able to acquire that, and now working on a plan to see what we can bring there that would help the community. Next slide. This is also a retail development on Commons Boulevard, right in front of the Home Depot. We are currently renovating it, and to add again, the retail uses are going down. So what we did here is bought a building that is 3 tenants, and we're going to be dividing it up to 5 tenants. The requirements or the need for commercial is just going down in square footage. So we are repurposing commercial buildings because the cost of the new buildings are going up so drastically that it just doesn't, it's not feasible to build a new commercial building when you can take a second generation space, rework it, bring it up to, you know, good condition, and then release it. Next slide. This is also on Commons Boulevard, a building that we took that was a single tenant. So it was a large 16,000 square foot building that we divided into 5 suites. Once again, showing you that the demand for larger commercial big box is going down drastically. So we're just, again, redeveloping commercial space to smaller to accommodate, you know, more small businesses in the area. Next slide. This is a smaller pocket development off of Joyner Road that we did. Just a small residential. I think we're gonna have 20 lots there. We did sidewalks all the way around. We're gonna actually connect, as the community says they wanna see a little bit of connectivity. We're gonna do a sidewalk all along Joyner Road to connect the neighboring Magnolia Gardens subdivision. So the residents of both communities can walk and have a, you know, a larger loop, and then doing a nice screening landscape buffer on the perimeter to separate ourselves from the neighbors and allow some privacy. Next slide. This is also in East Brainerd off of Ziegler Road, small rental community. At first we had gotten approval for 12 units. And then after speaking to some residents in the neighboring subdivision, we decided to reduce the density, provide off-street adequate parking. So there's no vehicles in the road, in the way. So that's going to be a rental community right off of Ziegler. And again, you see the landscaping buffer all the way around the perimeter, which we may touch on later. I think is a big concern for new development neighbors that are getting new development in their backyards to have an adequate landscaping buffer to provide them the privacy that they may have had before the development came in there. Next slide. This is also a new coffee shop we had an opportunity to work with. It is located on Shalford Road, and with, again, the demand going down for larger spaces, we were able to work with Mr. Price and design a site on an existing parking lot. We actually added some pervious areas, some grass, some landscaping to actually reduce the stormwater on that particular site. And that is located on Shalford Road. Next. I think that's it. So, you know, really, I think I want to touch on, as a resident, I want to touch on landscape buffers and, you know, maybe how we can make sure that the city is enforcing that for residents. If a development goes in, let's, you know, if we show a good, adequate landscape buffer, I think we need to follow through with that as developers and provide some privacy, some noise reduction for the neighbors.
All right, thank you, everyone. Karen, I'm going to ask a quick question to you. I see we've got one Q&A question that Travis is answering. I can't actually see whether or not we have any hands raised. Do we have any hands raised for asking questions?
I don't see any right now.
Okay. We can try to speak to that one that Travis is working on, unless, Travis, you want to speak up if you've got something you can quickly respond to for that one, if you'd like.
Go ahead and talk about that one. Maybe let Mike Price or Ross respond to that, since they've just been talking about that.
Sure, I'll read it off. And Travis, apologies, I know you're already working on that one. Maybe you can jump in and contribute if you feel you've got something to say. So the question from Jonathan Griffin is, Shalford Apartments, shown a few slides back, shows trees on the edge of property and trees to somewhat hide or disguise the property from Shalford Road. We're concerned for those of us living in subdivisions nearby, yet I don't think any trees were ever planted, and the tornado wiped out what few trees existed, such that the apartments are easily seen from Shalford Road. Who or what department enforces these properties developed to the plan?
So this is Mike Price. That's a great question. So it depends whether or not some of that is enforceable. And what I mean by that is this. When properties are rezoned and they abut residential properties and they're a higher zone, for instance, an apartment or commercial zone, then there are requirements to have landscape buffers in place. So in the instance where we show the slide with the new development occurring there off Shalford Road, we have a zone similar to the other apartments around us, which means when the tornado came through and tore out some of the trees that were adjoining us, there was no landscaping requirement, or there is no landscaping requirement to replant those trees. Now, trees that, for instance, might be located along Shalford Road, that were along in those apartment developments or any other commercial developments that were torn out, those were conditions of zoning or are conditions of development, street yard trees, for instance, or landscape trees. So if those are torn out, then you would call 311 and you would report that, and they would report that to the land development office as it relates to an area that if you believe landscaping was required and should be replaced and it's not been yet as a result of the tornado or other actions, then that's where you would report the incident to let the staff come out and review that. I will tell you that if you, for instance, drive up and down Gun Barrel Road, if you look closely, you will see certain newer businesses. The landscape ordinance has been in effect almost 20 years. If you look up and down Gun Barrel Road, and if you're familiar with the area, there are trees missing in front of many properties that are supposed to be there by development code guidelines, landscape ordinance. And I don't know that you will get a lot of action from the land development office because when I have seen those occur in years past, I've not seen any action on behalf of the city. I think there is there's a lack of enforcement or lack of desire maybe to enforce that. So just understand you may be fighting an uphill battle out of that. And until there is some sort of mechanism that sort of keeps developments or developers or business owners in check, there's sort of right now a lack of teeth to keep that in place once landscaping does go in.
Yeah, if there's an open permit on it though, the planning department has a really, really strict tree lady who's she's pretty on it. She makes sure that all of our plantings are in, and usually that's before we even like start talking about erosion control. So I've been pretty impressed with Chattanooga's ability to stay with us during our open permit phase. And I've not seen what it's like once we close our permits out. Haven't gotten to that part yet, but they've been pretty good about making sure we have all of our plantings in. So.
And that is true that they do require it when it first is built. But 6 months, a year later, 3 years later, that's where there currently really is not a mechanism to go back and require trees that have either died or been removed to be replaced. So it's true on the front end. The back end, though, is not necessarily policed or enforced with maybe the vigor that it should be.
Karen or Travis, would one of you be able to speak to LDO's enforcement capacity just briefly? I know y'all's tenure is a little bit longer than mine, and y'all know folks downstairs who were facing some of those issues. Can y'all speak to that real quick, one of you?
Yeah, I mean, I can say that the LDO is the city's land development office. They're the ones we're talking about that enforce these kind of issues, and they are their staff is really stretched. Just to be honest, I mean, I know they have a hard time just keeping up with new cases and things, permits coming in, much less going out and enforcing what's already out there. So, you know, these area plans are a good opportunity, I think, for a community to speak up if that's an issue in your area, to, you know, say something, and we maybe, you know, it's the squeaky wheel, perhaps. If enough people say something about it, we might see some movement somehow. We have a new administration, so now's a good time. Eric, I see one hand raised. If you want me to jump on that and then maybe get to your questions when we have a minute.
Yeah, I've got some questions to keep the conversation going, but I certainly want to hear from participants if they've got something they want to fire off. So yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I saw a hand raised and now it's gone down.
Well, if you do decide you want to raise your hand and be called on, we can certainly do so. Yeah. I'll just add.
It was Mr. Grayson. Okay.
Well, if he'd like to be called on to speak, if you just please raise your hand again, sir, and we'll be happy to accommodate your question.
Yeah. I have changed mine, but go ahead and then we'll see if it just pops back up. Sure.
Well, I just had a quick question for our panelists. Going back to that survey that we had, the most critical issue facing Area 11 today was that image of that that I shared from the survey, and the top response from that was development related. Again, was too much growth and lack of infrastructure to support it. So from the builder's perspective, how does a developer determine where to build or what kind of use is right for a site? Anybody can jump in.
Yeah,
not necessarily from a builder's perspective, Eric, if you'd like to.
So all sites are different, especially when you're talking about sites that may be closer to the commercial corridor, where people want connectivity and walkability. For example, those areas that are closer to the commercial corridor would require higher density to achieve, because you're paying more for the property up front. So you got to get a little bit more density, and then maybe you're able to put in sidewalks like the slide that was done on Shallowford Road. They put a sidewalk all the way to Shallowford Road. And I see people, I go up and down Shallowford, I see people walking up and using those sidewalks. So in order to be able to develop next to these commercial corridors, and Area 11 has a lot of commercial. So, you know, the density I know density is not a great topic, but a builder or developer has to get his density up to make his pro forma work in order to do some green space, some sidewalks, some adequate landscape buffers. And then as you go out farther into the rural areas, you know, those lots will get smaller, but that's why you saw in the East Brainerd area, we had a pretty substantial decline in houses available because everybody's moving north. Land prices are a little bit cheaper. You may be in the county, so the requirements may be a little bit different. So your development costs are much less. So in order for us to see new growth in East Brainerd, we have to work collectively with the community to see what they want to see, how we as developers can make a site better, but also the community has to remember that the developer's got to make his numbers work, or else he can't make the development work. And then if our growth continues to go down, then our commercial and retail corridor will decline. And then it's just not good for anybody with, you know, housing prices or the actual area.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. That's constructive. Anybody else want to add to that point or piggyback on that to something else?
I'd like to just add, it sort of segues a little differently than maybe the original question. And in that poll, what I noticed is only 2% of the respondents indicated that the type of development occurring was of poor quality. Mm-hmm. So I think that speaks to a sort of broader discussion, which is they understand, and we see that, yes, this brings on traffic congestion and the rest, but at the end of the day, it's not like you're getting development that is bringing down property values. And so by the fact that these are considered by and large by the 98% of the respondents, that's not an issue as far as the types of developments, and that is bringing down quality of life from a property value standpoint. And I think that speaks well to the type of development that is occurring in the area versus development that you could see where everything is being converted to types of development that could bring down property values.
Yeah, certainly. Well, and that, I think that segues pretty well into another question I had, which was, you know, we've spoken a bit about buffering and kind of the contextual nature of higher density or more intense uses going up, redevelopment or new development. So I'd like to hear from each of you, if you would, about what do you think are good ways to build new types of housing, new types of development on formerly commercial properties in a way that's sensitive to the existing character of neighborhoods. You know, I think people hear about, you know, we're talking about how preferences are changing and trends nationally are changing. And I think there's probably a tendency to recoil for a lot of folks. I certainly, you know, if you own a home, you're a little bit cautious about what that might do to your neighborhood. And, you know, nobody wants to see something change dramatically. So how can we, with respect to those existing longstanding neighborhoods, kind of bring in some of these newer and innovative housing types and new developments on the corridors that's kind of sensitive to those existing places and where also?
I, being out of towner, I specialize in something that's called the missing middle, which is a term that's, I don't know if it's thrown out a lot in Chattanooga. It's thrown out a lot in Nashville and in certain circles all over the US. And basically it speaks to just a missing housing stock. Like a lot of the plans that I showed, that I've seen thrown up on the board, look like they're kind of 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,000 square feet to 2,500 square feet garage product. And what we found in Nashville is that we kind of get a sterilization socioeconomically if we build the same product and we don't try to maintain a diversity of product. And so, you know, kind of very, very much so on purpose and by design, you know, being thoughtful of creating a diverse housing product and a diverse housing size will naturally open up your neighborhood's ability to kind of create a diverse socioeconomic area. And I think that you know, without putting permanent measures in place for affordability, it's a way to kind of diversify affordability as well, by being able to build different product sizes. And, you know, we've got everything from micro units that are 350 square feet up to, you know, 1-bedroom houses that are 1,000 square feet. They're single family detached. And so kind of, you know, crafting a community vision and creating kind of a formula of what you want to see and how diverse you want to see your neighborhood is kind of a first step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned missing middle. That's something that we're you know, seeing a little bit in parts of urban neighborhoods like East Chattanooga, but also in the suburban context too. You know, seeing that pop up in certain places. So yeah, staff is familiar with the term, and I think it's becoming a more prevalent thing in Chattanooga as well. Anybody else want to add to that? We've got 2 more questions that have popped up that we can jump to, but does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that I think that typically when you're converting commercial properties to residential, your screening is not near as typically difficult because people are used to seeing some sort of commercial development and seeing residential. The screening is not necessarily as large an issue. Your greater challenge is, especially in East Brainerd, is that much of this area was developed before the 90s. And now you have different housing types coming in that abut some of these developments that are older. And so there you're having differential house types that are right in the same proximity or adjoining one another. And there your screening becomes far more important in my mind to achieve the balance between, well, we just can't build 1990 houses now because that's just not where we are as a nation in terms of what the product is people are expecting. But by the same token, you can't trample over the rights of those that have built and live or bought and live in the houses that were constructed, that are older. So the challenge becomes, how do you achieve both? And I think landscaping is typically a great tool to use to be able to buffer those differentiating types of houses so that neither is basically causing headaches to the other as it relates to what they see looking out their back window versus what the other sees out their back window.
Great, Mike. Thanks. And I'll just add real quick to that. For those of you unaware, currently the county is facing its own R1 zoning change request. That remains to be seen, but within the city, which is where Area 11 is located, the RPA is currently working with a consultant to audit our zoning code to find where there may be issues, redundancies, creating problems for our land development office. And so there will be a zoning audit report that will be coming out that will make recommendations to RPA and to Planning Commission to look at where we might be able to shore up some of those compatibility issues that Mike is referring to. If landscape buffering is certainly a good, I don't want to say a Band-Aid, but it's certainly a good way to to mask incompatibilities in a polite way. But there may be opportunities in the future for new types of zones that can allow for a building form to be a little bit more appropriate next to, say a single family neighborhood or a moderate density apartment complex that mirrors the same size and scale or has, similar access. It kind of blends in more appropriately, and if the use is right. So just to let everyone know, we are currently conducting that zoning audit, and there may be some good tools that come out of that. Now, just to be very clear, that doesn't mean that zones will be replaced or that people's properties will be rezoned. This is purely just looking at our code, and our code is 50 plus years old, so we're just looking at it to see where can we improve it in the future. So just throwing that out there.
Eric, before you go to another question, we've got a couple of them, but John Bridger reminded me, and since we've been talking about Planning Commission a little bit, just to recognize 2 of our planning commissions are participating in the audience as well, commissioners, Chris Mabey and Adam Brown. So just want to give a shout out to them, say thank you for joining us, and just let the audience know that kind of we're all listening into this and hearing what you guys are having to say. So we have a question, interesting question from Arden Woods about the Wendy's that he's asking how a decision was made to put a Wendy's in when a Wendy's business recently failed on East Brainerd Road and Brainerd Road. Kind of interesting question, because we do tend to see a lot of chain stores, kind of an old one closes and a new one opens up further down the road. Anybody want to address that one?
Well, I'll take an attempt since we represent the developer that is doing that. So oftentimes the location on which side of the road that a restaurant, especially fast food, goes on will determine a lot of times its success or failures. So for instance, majority of traffic on East Brainerd Road is westbound in the AM and it's eastbound in the PM. Well, when you think of Wendy's, you're thinking of hamburgers for lunch and you're thinking of hamburgers for dinner. Well, it was located on the wrong side of the road. Now, if you're wanting breakfast, then you want Hardee's or Bojangles. Both of those are located on the heavily, predominantly traveled westbound AM traffic in the morning, and they do very, very well. So the thought process when that Wendy's closed down was that it was on the wrong side of the road, and that by moving it over to Gun Barrel, where you have quite a bit of afternoon traffic for lunch, and you'll get some for dinner as well, that was a much better location for that type of use. Only time will tell, but that was the thought process.
Okay. We also had a question for Mr. Ryman. He's been to several planning commission meetings, and where new developments, the developers have stated there are no traffic concerns, and was wondering if that's the case, why do we still have continual traffic congestion? And if it's taking 10 plus years, if we're 10 plus years behind in our infrastructure and it takes several years to improve roads, why can we not request the developers to add another lane to existing roads along the entire property frontage?
I'll try to take that one because I do hear that from time to time in zoning cases. So I think maybe what I have heard often said is that traffic that is a result of some new development is not necessarily going to help the traffic, but it's sort of a drop in the bucket is maybe a better analogy of how to state that. And so typically, if you think about much of the traffic as it relates to East Brainerd and other areas in the city, the problem, the choke points are not the main road itself. The choke points are the intersections. And there's oftentimes not a lot that a developer can do as it relates to the choke point at an intersection, because A, it's not in front of their property, and B, they don't have control over the signal, and they just can't go out and buy people's land at those intersections to try to add a lane in those instances. The only thing that they can typically impact is what's directly in front of their property, and adding a lane doesn't accomplish anything in the general sense that I have normally seen by adding one lane for some short distance across a piece of property. So typically most developers are limited in what they're really going to be able to impact either positively or negatively, unless you're some major type of development. So for instance, when Waterside was developed, in that particular instance, the developer partnered with the city, and we see that Gun Barrel Road was widened to 3 lanes. We saw a widening take place on Shallowford Road. We saw new traffic signal installed. So when you see a bigger development where there is that ability to do that, I see in just about every instance I can think of where the developer has stepped up and done what was required of him to help alleviate the traffic concerns. But as a general rule, your intersections are more of your choke points, not your thoroughfares or travel points between intersections. Those have plenty of capacity as a general.
Just as a developer perspective, you know, I would much rather design my developments to the human being as opposed to designing to the automobile. I find that trying to design the car is what we've been trying to do for the last 60 years. And it's part of the reason why we've got a lot of the issues we have with our cities today. And so I definitely think that walkability is something we try to design to more than drivability.
If I could mention too, and suggest everyone that's listening on our website, if you go to our website and click on the area 11 plan, we have an existing conditions report on there. We also have 2 surveys that are live now, one about housing development and one about commercial development. And each one of those has some background information on it. And I would just encourage you to look at all that, especially I think in the existing conditions report, there's a whole chapter on transportation issues, and it describes some of the factors that cause transportation or traffic congestion and some of the potential solutions, none of which are easy, I can tell you that. But I think it's kind of a good primer on what some of the issues are and how difficult and expensive it is to solve some of them. And some of the issues are not just development. You get a lot of commuter traffic coming from further west through East Brainerd. You have a lot of subdivisions that are all emptying out onto the same 3 or 4 roads, East Brainerd Road, Shallowford Road, and you're going to have that kind of congestion. As Mike said, a lot of it then piles up at the intersections. But please do take a look at that existing conditions report, and I will put in a plug for the surveys. Please do take the surveys. We really want to hear what you guys have to think. Got a couple more questions in here. Mr. Poteet is asking, what is the plan for Jenkins Road and the Paces Ferry project and rezoning at Standerford Gap Road?
Sarah Cook was our resident transportation expert, and she had her ear to the ground on each and every one of these. I can't speak to those very well on my own, so if somebody would like to rise to the occasion, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, we may have to
certainly get back to that if we don't have a detailed answer. If we've got your email from the registration, we can follow up with you and give you some more information on that.
Yeah, and we'll put all of these questions and answers in our FAQ on the website in the next few days too. We'll do a little research on that one. We'll also have another question about higher density development and studies showing that correlates with higher crime, and that they're now seeing some shootings in Area 11, many of which go unreported. So the question is, what can we do about controlling crime by limiting density?
Well, I'd like to speak to that one just real quick. I'd be very interested to see the source of that study. And I'm certainly not questioning your credibility as a question asker, but as a urban planning professional, we've seen just the opposite from more recent research. Now there may be a correlation there between the median household income, the rate of poverty that an area is experiencing. But more or less, the trend is just the opposite, that higher density does not have a correlation to crime or anything of that nature. But certainly we can have a dialogue about that and explore that further. I will say too, though, that if folks are concerned about, density can be a loaded term for many people, and we want to be sensitive to that. But density is not the end all be all definer of how a neighborhood looks and how it interacts with surrounding neighborhoods and other areas. I think more importantly, if we're concerned about crime, then we should be looking at things like what are the access to jobs and access to things that keep people out of doing criminal activity. So that's certainly something crime is definitely an aspect of something that we will acknowledge in the plan, but it's not necessarily something that we're going to look to addressing. In the past, some places like in East Chattanooga have looked to downzoning their neighborhood as a intention of limiting ne'er-do-wells, riffraff, what have you. That was the intent. And I will say that the intent of that did not really match the consequences of those decision-making, or those decisions rather. So what ended up happening now in East Brainerd is that land values, especially in Highland Park neighborhood, have rocketed up, and really those areas are very undeveloped or underdeveloped rather, relevant to the amount of public infrastructure that's in that area. So in East Brainerd, that's a little bit different, right? We've got not right next to downtown, we're several miles away, certainly. But East Brainerd also does have a lot of public investment in public infrastructure, and certainly crime can be a concern, but that's limiting density or downzoning is not necessarily a solution to concerns about crime in a neighborhood. I hope that answers your question. Anybody else want to speak to that?
Urban Land Institute has a lot of studies that have been done that show that density and having, you know, kind of 24-hour eyes on streets is shown to lower crime rates. I think that's kind of a loaded question, but I think that the density done right and done well, you know, also brings about more perks for your neighborhood as well. If you have a better tax generation per acre that comes with density, then you get more things like mass transit. They're more likely to send services out your way. You're more likely to get better benefits to the city. Those are things that can go hand in hand with density. I've never heard of crime rate being something that's like density though.
Yeah, Eric Myers, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm glad Michael brought up earlier missing middle housing. I personally, as a fellow Chattanoogan, I just want to highlight the fact that I live across the street. I look out my porch at the original missing middle housing that was built in 1920, three fourplexes in a row. And it's interesting from a safety standpoint what those homes do for our neighborhood. Most of the single family homes in our neighborhood have working professionals in them that lead 8 to 5 jobs. They leave at very regular times. If you were a ne'er-doer, you could pretty much track those individuals. Now, the people that live in the apartments, they do kind of grill out and party a little bit on Monday nights because that's when they're not at the restaurant working, but they're not doing anything wrong. They're actually activating their front yard. They're actually animating our neighborhood. And they're being responsible people for most part. The thing is that they come and go and their lives are a little bit more unscripted. And so their eyes are on our neighborhood and on my home more often than my eyes are on my home. And so it's an interesting dynamic that unfortunately apartments and rental units and density, gentle density, like the density that Michael mentioned, can really, really do some wonderful things for safety and security and having more eyes on your street and having more eyes on your home, which makes sense.
That's great.
We have Mr. Grayson has a question wondering if we have an update on the traffic signal at East Brainerd and Joyner Road. I assume that's the one that's been talked about in conjunction with the redevelopment of that former elementary school site. I know there is a new proposal for that site. I don't remember if a traffic signal is going in or not. Does anybody know for sure?
So I know that case is set to be heard before the Planning Commission on Monday. And if memory serves me right, it was a condition that once that site develops that the traffic signal go in. So all I could say is that once you see bulldozers start work on that particular site, plan on a traffic signal going in about a year later.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Okay.
We only got about 5 minutes left. Any last question? Parting comments?
Parting comments from our panelists, if you like.
I have a question if we still have time.
Sure, go ahead, Travis. I saw you took your hand down, so I wasn't sure if you still wanted to ask.
Well, yeah, I just wasn't sure if there'd be time. So there was a couple of comments made about retrofitting suburban development, and I think we understand that the costs are rising for construction materials. So maybe a question for Mr. Kenner or Ross there. In your experience, do you see a true shift happening where it's more cost effective to refurbish commercial space versus build new commercial space? Or is this maybe a result of lack of available land? I'm just a little bit curious why there might be a shift from a developer standpoint.
Yeah, this is Ross. I think there is some additional land available. However, I think it boils down to, as retail use shifts, you're going to have some second generation space. And even if you redevelop it, you still got the structure. So you don't have to maybe rework the outside walls, but you might break it up into smaller spaces within. So it's just cost prohibitive to build a lot of new things. I mean, you're still going to see new buildings go up, and we need that. But personally, it costs less money to buy something existing that maybe went out of business and retrofit it and turn it into maybe 2 or 3 new businesses for a new small business in the area.
I would say that the mindset of how we build and how we develop, we call it the Congress of New Urbanism, but it's actually old urbanism. It's getting back to designing things that are walkable and that are usable to the human being. And so as you walk on a mall structure, you realize that there, as you can see in front of you, as this image, there's just a bunch of giant boxes. And basically, if you're going to try to walk in between these facilities, it's a giant sea of really hot concrete. And so as you retrofit suburbia, it's about doing adaptive reuse on the buildings, which will lower cost, but it's also about rethinking the space, interaction with it. And really trying to recreate it and repurpose it in a way that's thoughtful and that's inviting and makes you want to just take off on foot and not stop until you hit your next destination and not die along the way. So strategically planting trees the right way. I mean, there's all different kinds of things that most people don't even think matter, but really do matter. So the built environment is really, when it's thought out and done right, it has some of the biggest influence over us as human beings than most people don't even realize. So.
Got pretty deep there, Michael. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here. Karen's asked me to put our website and YouTube page back up there just in case anybody hasn't had a chance to visit those or bookmark those. I want to say thank you very much to everybody attending. Thank you especially to our experts for their time and their expertise. Just real quick, I want to, so I'm going to skip to the end here. If you're epileptic or prone to seizures, please look away. I'm going to lightning quick through these. And we'll go back to the end. Okay, so here's where we are in the process of our plan. We're doing our community choices phase, and soon after that, we'll be switching into our plan development process, where we actually start looking at the future land use map, and we'll be speaking to a lot of different people and parties with different perspectives, neighborhood associations, business owners, developers. We'll be meeting with various city departments, and then of course onto the adoption phase there at the last step. So just one more thing, we're doing our community workshops in August, so that will be the next phase. Some will be online, but we want to have at least one in-person workshop, so be on the lookout for that. Again, please take our survey. They'll be available as these panels are the day of the panels, I guess. So you'll be able to take, if you haven't already, the housing survey and the commercial development survey are currently available. So please go to our website, take the other ones as they become available, and please get on our mailing list so we can keep you roped in and keep you informed and continue to get your input. Anything else, Karen? Housekeeping that we have?
Well, I will say everyone that's on this webinar, we will automatically add to our email list. But if you know other people that aren't, please encourage them to get involved. We really appreciate it. So yeah, just stay tuned for July 22nd is our next panel discussion on transportation. I know that's a hot topic. And July 29th is a panel discussion on natural resources, parks, and greenways. And as Eric said, each time we have one of those, there's also an accompanying survey that goes with it. So please do check out our website. You can get all that information. You can find the links to the surveys and all kinds of good background information on there. Yeah, so let me echo a thank you to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you guys taking time to come in. It's kind of confusing with 2 Erics and 2 Mikes, and but I think we kept it straight this evening. So thanks a lot. Michael, did you put your hand up? You need to.
Yeah, no, I had one last thing. Eric, do you guys have an active tactical urbanism group there in Chattanooga right now?
We did briefly in the downtown area. They're kind of inactive now, but it was Eric Myers. I think you can speak to that a little better than I could. They were affiliated with this group for a little while. But yes, something we'd probably like to reactivate. Maybe there's an opportunity with the new administration to get something going.
We've got turbonashville.org where you can kind of take tips and filter in ideas. And so I would challenge anyone on this call to, if you can think of any space that you see that you think could be better in some way, shape, or form, look up tactical urbanism and see what it means. And it's literally using temporary measures to influence permanent change. So you can use $200 worth of fiber-based paint and pallets and whatever else and reconfigure an entire street for a day and get it repainted if you want to. It's pretty cool stuff. But I would challenge you guys all to kind of think about it as you're driving through this neighborhood. What could make it better? What's one area we can take over and change for a day?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Sponsor a tactical urbanism event if you guys can help. So.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, our panelists and all the participants. We really appreciate you guys joining us, and we hope we will see all or most of you again on July 22nd. And please go to our website and take the survey. One more plug for that. So everybody have a good evening and a good week, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.